The Buddha in the Attic by Julie Otsuka. In the process of writing a novel, we often want to give it a title. It may not be the final one, it often changes once the book is completed. But during the writing process, that working title becomes a kind of anchor. It reminds us of what we're trying to say and helps us stay on track. The final title, though, usually reflects what we've come to understand through the act of writing. That's how I felt the title, The Buddha in the Attic, might have come about. We see that Buddha in the attic only towards the end of the novel, and there it represents so much and seems to pull together everything we've read. Up to that moment, we follow a story, curious about where it's leading, but not in the way we race through a mystery novel. This book moves slowly. We walk through years. We watch lives being built, broken apart, rebuilt again, gently, quietly. By the time I finished the novel, I felt as though I'd lived an entire other life. And maybe that's why I read and why I write. We only get one life to live. The choices we make carry us in one direction, down a single path. As we walk this path, other roads disappear, roads we didn't take, options we weren't even aware of. We can only live one life, but through stories, whether reading or writing, we get to experience many lives. Not fully, of course, but still we get glimpses, fragments, truths. Between 1908 and 1920, women left Japan for America to marry Japanese men they had never met. All they had were photographs, pictures of men who promised comfort, prosperity, and happiness. The first chapter of Julie Otsuka's novel ends with this line: "We told ourselves, this is America, everything will be fine. And we were wrong." As a writer, I found that to be a perfect final line for a first chapter. A novel should make you want to keep reading. That line doesn't try to shock me or tease me with suspense. It doesn't suggest a twist ending or pose a mystery for me to solve. I already have a sense of what's coming. I don't expect a happy ending, and I'm not drawn in by what will happen. I'm drawn in by how. How will they endure it? How will they survive what I suspect is ahead? Since this is a historical novel inspired by real events, the what happened is less important than the how did they live through it. Even if I didn't know the history, I could look it up. So the novel draws our attention to the lived experience, and asking how rather than what feels like the right choice for a historical novel. Otsuka's narrator is interesting. She uses a we rather than an I. At first, it seems like a single voice, but it quickly becomes clear that it's the collective voice of many women. On the boat, we were mostly virgins. We had long black hair and flat white feet, and we were not very tall. Some of us had eaten nothing but rice gruel as young girls and had slightly bowed legs. And some of us were only 14 years old and were still young girls ourselves. Some of us came from the city and wore stylish city clothes, but many more of us came from the country, and on the boat we wore the same old kimonos we'd been wearing for years, faded hand-me-downs from our sisters that had been patched and re-dyed many times. Some of us came from the mountains and had never before seen the sea except for in pictures, and some of us were the daughters of fishermen who had been around the sea all our lives. Perhaps we'd lost a brother or father to the sea, or a fiancé, or perhaps someone we loved had jumped into the water one unhappy morning and simply swum away. And now it was time for us too to move on. In an interview, Otsuka explains that this was an intentional decision. She wasn't telling the story of a single woman. She wanted to reflect the shared experience of those many voices. She could have chosen to voice a different woman in each chapter, but that again would not have given the feeling of the collective experience. This collective we creates a rhythm, almost a pulse through the book. There are long, list-like passages, and this repetition adds a lyrical quality. It brings both weight and lightness to the story. Without ever saying this was awful, the book shows us how unbearable things can be, and how life just is sometimes. There is grief, loss, disappointment, and heartbreak here. But the rhythm of the language, the collective voice, keeps the narrative from collapsing under sorrow. We see hope, choices, responsibility. Even in the midst of pain, life continues, people carry on. They endure disappointment and still find moments of stillness and purpose. The novel reminded me that nothing is permanent. It doesn't build toward a dramatic climax. There is no tidy resolution. It simply reflects what happened, what was. The conflicts are real, but they rise and fall naturally, the way they do in life. While researching The Picture Brides, I discovered another book, Picture Bride by Yoshika Uchida, published in 1987. Unlike Otsuka's novel, Uchida tells the story through a single protagonist. Reading Otsuka has opened a door I want to walk through. I want to read Uchida's novel as well, and compare how two writers approach the same subject. Comparative reading like this, I feel, will develop my writing skills. The Buddha in the Attic had been sitting on my shelf for a long time. I just hadn't been ready for it, but I believe books find us when we need them. As I've been struggling with the growing divide in the world, the rise in the idea of the other, the horrors of prejudice, this book called out to me. It reminds us and tells us how dangerous it is to judge someone without knowing them, to reduce a person to a category or a stereotype. It shows us what it looks like when people are stripped of their individuality and denied their humanity. I will be adding Otsuka's other books to my reading list. When the Emperor Was Divine, written 8 years before The Buddha in the Attic, and The Swimmers, written 2 years after.